Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. We're going to get started. We're going to actually reverse the two items. The first item is going to be Bill 3319, Police Community Policing. We'd already had a work session on that one, and we had discussed that fairly extensively, and obviously the second one is going to have a little bit more of discussion. Councilmember Vice President Hucker is going to be here, but he's going to get here late, so because he's speaking at the East County Census Kickoff, and hopefully he'll be joining us shortly, but we're going to go ahead and get started. And as we get started, if we can, I don't know, Chief, if you want to join us at the table. Police Chief, there's so many chiefs in the room today. I have to be very specific on how I say this. Yeah, everybody in the whole room jumped up, Chief. I just want you to know that. That's how many chiefs we have. Yeah. Anyhow, if Ms. Myhill and Ms. Frog, if you could lead us off on this, and then we will begin.
Sure. As you already mentioned, the Public Safety Committee did meet on February 13th to review the Community Policing Bill, Bill 3319. At that meeting, you reviewed all the public hearing testimony and correspondence that the Council had received to date. You also reviewed an amendment that was proposed by one of the lead sponsors, Councilmember Navarro, which addressed many of the issues that had been raised in the testimony and the correspondence. I have for you on page 2 to 3 just a summary of I should first say that attached to your packet is the amended bill because you did support the amendment proposed by Ms. Navarro. On pages 2 and 3 is just a bulleted list, just a reminder of what the amendment did do. I don't have any other issues to raise for you. So the amended version that of Bill 3319 begins on Circle 1 and incorporates that amendment.
Okay. Councilmember Albanaz, do you have anything to?
No, I would just move, Mr. Chairman, that we move this to a vote with the amendments as proposed and laid out during our previous work session.
Thank you very much, and I think it's going to be a 2-0. We discussed this thoroughly, and we appreciate. And Chief, unless you have anything to add to this, thank you very much for being with us. It's always good to see you. Thank you. The next one might not go quite as fast to the fire chief. How are you, Chief? Might not go that slowly. Don't get me wrong here. I don't want to.
It's like following Tom Manger.
I don't want to.
This is always a challenge.
Ooh, that's funny. And Ms. Frog, I guess, has this one, please.
Good morning, everyone. Susan Farrell, Council staff. This is the review of the FY21-26 CIP for Fire and Rescue. It is a 61-page packet, but I'm not going to scare you. It's not going to take anywhere near that long. That was just documentation of approved CIPs versus recommended CIP projects. The current recommended budget for this 21 through 26 is $113.5 million for fire and rescue. This is a slight decrease, about $522,000 from the approved CIP from FY19 to 24. This decrease stems from several different moving parts, primarily from a completion of scheduled work at the Clarksburg Fire Station and Glen Echo Fire Station renovation. Savings are offset by slippage in the apparatus replacement program and adding Phase 2 historic Clarksburg sewer project to the Clarksburg Fire Station. The fire department actually has 14 capital projects, although 4 are pending closeout, and I'll discuss them very briefly at the end of this. I've put the fire stations first. As always, there is some interplay in fire station location, and that comes up in this CIP and how they relate to the other fire stations that are close to them. So I have asked if the fire chief and OMB and DGS can talk about that a little bit as we get to the particular fire stations.
Okay.
The first one for your review today is Clarksburg Fire Station. Its PDF is located on circles 4 through 7. It provides for a new fire and rescue station in the Clarksburg area. That's the intersection of Clarksburg Road and Frederick Road, as well as the purchase of associated apparatus. The prior year PDFs had included one new tanker and a new brush truck that were expected to be purchased to provide service to this new station, from this new station. That was looked at in light of some escalating costs, and they asked the fire chief to prioritize which piece of apparatus was more important. And so at this point, the brush truck is no longer included in costs for this CIP. The tanker still is. They're expected Clarksburg is currently being served by a fully functional interim station in leased space. This project is necessary due to the present and projected population density in the Clarksburg area. It's complete now through the design development stage, and construction is expected to begin in early 2020. The project was changed slightly from an original one-story structure to a two-story structure in order to reduce the building footprint from 22,000 square feet to 17,000 square feet, and that reduction was necessary to meet the impervious area restrictions. As I mentioned before, the project cost has escalated a bit. It's gone up from $30 million to $34 million due to the updated scope, including the redesign of the station to meet the new 10 Mile Creek SPA requirements, as well as the addition of the sewer construction for Clarksburg. Phase 1 of the sewer construction has been completed. Phase 2 is still in process. At this point, recommending approval of that project as submitted by the executive.
Okay.
The next couple of stations are where
Well, do we want to do them one by one, just to be, or do you want to go through all of them?
we can go. Well, I'm not recommending any changes,
I
so
realize,
I can
yeah.
just go at the end if you
Okay.
want to.
Well, and before we do that, then,
Okay.
may the panel please introduce themselves so the public is aware of who you are. Yeah, and you're going to need to cut on your microphone as you.
Jack Olstein, Fire Chief.
Steve Lamphere, Fire Rescue Fleet Manager.
Good morning, Greg Austin, Department of General Services.
And Mary Back, the Office of Management and Budget.
Thank you very much. Okay, please continue.
Sure. The next one is Rockville Fire Station 3 renovation, which has been in the CIP for several years. This is a volunteer-owned station. This project provides for partial funding for the renovation and enhancement of the fire station, which was constructed in 1965. $500,000 has been placed in the CIP as a one-time county contribution to the project. The current facility has aged. It does not comply with ADA or building code requirements for fire suppression systems, HVAC and electrical systems, living quarters, and workspace. Architectural plans were submitted and approved by the Rockville Volunteer Fire Department Board of Directors. There are some ongoing negotiations here to try to find a different location for this fire station because the current site is so small for what would be needed necessarily to meet modern firefighting needs. That's an ongoing process. I believe they have to negotiate with the city of Rockville as well. I don't know the current status of that. However, if the station is actually moved, depending on where it gets moved to, there is a project out there in the ether, has not been formally submitted, I don't think, to any part of the CIP process for Shady Grove Fire Station 36, which I believe is supposed to be at Shady Grove Road and Route 355. However, depending, again, where they place the Rockville station, that may not even be necessary. And also, the Fire Station 23 that we're about to talk about next for White Flint on Rollins Avenue may still be needed in the future, again, depending on where the Rockville Fire Station is located. I was wondering if the fire chief and DGS could speak to that.
Okay?
So I'll start off as the interaction. We'll go a little bit on the history behind Greg and my joint work with Rockville VFD and Rockville City, and then we'll get into the interaction of the three different stations and those potentialities. So for about 6 years now, Greg and I collectively have been working with the Rockville volunteer leadership about site selection possibilities, looking at a way along the pike, so aiming from Wooten Parkway on the south end up to about Manakee Street on the north end, looking at available different site options with the goal of roughly a 4-acre parcel of land. Naturally, along that line of 355, that's very limited. That was one of our steps we worked with the Rockville Board about 5 and 4 years ago. We then, along with Mayor Newton and her staff, engaged conversations with Andy Zuckerman and the folks at Board of Education about the front of the Carver site, so 355 and Manakee. There's a nuance there about the sight line pertaining to the visual a point of the front of the historic site. So from the intersection of 355 and Manakee, the front of the Carver building has to be still remain visible as its historic preservation. There's a possibility of using some land on the front of that lot in between Ivy League Terrace and Manakee Street. That was been dialogued with the Board of Education folks and is still in limbo, and is one that the board Administrative folks, let me roll that back a second. MCPS administrative and facility folks are still evaluating and considering the opportunities there. They are also looking at the holistic approach of the Manakee site, where the Carver facility is, and Rock Terrace, the adjacent school behind the Carver building. So that is one that was in conjunction with Mayor Newton, her staff, Greg, DGS staff, and folks out of Dr. West's office. So the opportunity presents itself, where do we relocate Station 3, and how does that impact all of these other components? Station 36, Mr. Katz, you and I have talked about it.
We have.
Pontiac, the property in the general vicinity of Shady Grove and 355, is where we pinpoint an ideal location for a Shady Grove station. That point is growing. The EYA, Crabs Branch redevelopment, is an area that density is on tap, and as that continues to develop, that will become a higher and more demanding area for service. And that apex, 355 in Shady Grove, is served by 4 stations. 3 of the 4 are in the top 5 busiest. So Station 3, Rockville, Station 8, Gaithersburg, and Station 32, Treville, are all in our top 5 busiest. So their opportunities to be on other emergencies are high, and thus not able to assist in getting to that Shady Grove and 355 area in a timely fashion. So we would like to see a station in future years at Shady Grove and 355. And as Susan outlined, it's not in site selection or facility planning. Montgomery Village is, which is the East Village area along Goshen Road, and then a rebuild of Station 24 in Hillendale. But from dialogue, one of the things that Greg and I looked at was, what about going up as north as College Parkway? What about going up as north as Goody Drive? Because the road network is pivotal in the fire station's response area. And the east-west connection crossing the railroad tracks is what our limiting factor is anywhere along the pike. So we've looked at the opportunities of going to Goody and 355 as a location for a new Station 3, which could alleviate the need for a Station 36. Now, we do not have a piece of property looked at. We do not have, our claws into some dirt there yet. But this is what Susan outlines as the variability of where Station 3 goes will impact the potentiality of a 36 Shady Grove need. And on the south perspective, where Station 3 goes impacts the potentiality of needing to retain a level of service at Twinbrook / Rollins Station 23 currently. As with the construction of the White Flint Station, all of its resources will move south on the pike to effectively Randolph-Montrose, and there may be an additional gap based upon where 3 moves and the final location. So DGS and OMB and Fire Rescue have discussed this. This is a dialoguing point that we know there's opportunities exist. We know that we don't know exactly how the redevelopment and growth is going to go, and some of this is really pivotal, and decisions will be made 2 and 3 years from now that'll make these points of discussion, as in retaining Rollins Avenue or where 36 or 3 would go.
Right, and bottom line, this is a game of dominoes. I mean, obviously, one affects the others. But bottom line is, for the $500,000 in the CIP, this is obviously makes sense still at this moment. Correct. Until we know for sure. And I'm assuming that I know you will continue to work with the city of Rockville, since they are directly affected by any changes or potential changes in any way on this. So.
Absolutely. And Rockville Volunteer Fire Department has committed with DGS and Fire Rescue to do a MOU and a partnership on the rebuild of Station 3 or the relocation of Station 3. So we understand that as we get a site and then get a plan, we would be coming forward with a full CIP project that has the full scope involved.
And I'm comfortable with how we're trying to to do this. I mean, this is a puzzle. Go ahead. You're good? Okay. Thank you.
On to White Flint Fire Station 23. This project's at circles 22 through 24 in your staff report. It's currently in the preliminary design stage, and it provides for a new 5-bay fire and rescue station in the Rockville-White Flint area, as well as the purchase of associated apparatus. The new station will be in the southeast quadrant of Route 355 and Randolph Road at Maple Avenue. The current station, as just discussed, Fire Station 23, is on Rollins Avenue, and it's a 2-bay station, and it's truly small, and that makes it very difficult to meet existing demand. In addition, the White Flint sector is intended to develop significantly with a mix of housing, commercial, retail, and civic uses. The relocation of this station will better position the station in a high-density development area and allow for a significantly larger station that meets increased service needs. Space has been added to co-locate a future police department substation. Planning began in the winter of 2017. Construction is expected to begin in mid to late 2022. The cost increase is approximately $780,000, and that's over the approved amount, and that's due to prior project delays. According to the January Chief Administrative Officer's report, the project design submitted by the architect for this project came in over budget. The committee may wish to ask a little bit more about what the next steps are in the design process to see how they're going to work with the architect to either, modify the plan to meet cost constraints or look at higher costs. I'm not sure how much DGS and the fire chief can speak to that.
All right. Well, the first question is, do we actually own this land at this point?
Good morning. Again, Greg Austin, Department of General Services. We do own the land. This is we purchased some of it from the State Highway Administration, and then our colleagues at DOT acquired some of the properties along Maple Avenue for the purposes of that master plan business district street. So we're the beneficiaries of some of that land as well. So we do own and control this property.
And to the point about the architect looking at,
Yeah, it's a fairly straightforward explanation. Design has been ongoing, and not knowing whether or not we were going to have a substation and the urban district, or an urban district no police substation, and that those questions were still unanswered at the time that we initiated design. So the architect effectively designed it. All of these components, and so all of them together are well over the budget that we intended in the budget you see in the PDF. Since that time, decisions have been made about we will have a police substation. We will not have the urban district. DTS has made other arrangements for their fiber hub, so that does not need to be a component. And at the same time, we're working with our partners at Fire and Rescue to look at the overall program, see where we can shrink spaces, not the bays, obviously, but other spaces within the building without sacrificing program or operations. And so that's an ongoing design issue as well. But we fully expect to come back, work within the budget that's in the PDF or proposed PDF, and that's really the explanation behind the cost increase.
are you okay with that?
Yeah.
And Chief, you're
Absolutely.
very good. Thank you. Next.
The next project is the apparatus replacement program. The executives recommended CIP for this increases expenditures by about $12 million. The increase is due to the addition of years FY25 and FY26 to the expenditure schedule and the project scope, as well as some cost adjustments based on recent purchase experience. Fire and Rescue anticipates replacing the following units over a 6-year period: 10 aerials, 38 EMS units, 16 engines, 4 rescue squads, 1 tanker, and there is an itemized projected replacement schedule on Circle 61 for your review. I just wanted to note that these are approximate quantities, and they may be adjusted slightly as costs and departmental needs change.
Okay.
Just to point out that it's funded through a mixture of short-term financing and fire funds, including the Emergency Medical Services transport revenue. Moving on to the level of effort projects, the recommended CIP for the following systemic level of effort projects. These are summarized in a following table for you on page 6. Each project summary contains information on which stations will be impacted by the level of effort projects. However, these lists are again subject to change as the county reviews relative need, facility conditions, LFRD concurrence, and the cost effectiveness of planned work. The first one for your review is the female facility upgrade on circles 8 through 9. That project provides for the design and construction of lockers, showers, and restrooms for specified fire stations. Female facilities are needed at fire stations due to the increase of female personnel in the fire and rescue operations. Work at Kensington Station 21, Cabin John Station 10 have been completed. Work at Cabin John Fire Station 30 will be completed this year, and work on Gaithersburg Fire Station 8 will begin in FY23. The total project costs here have also increased by about $475,000, and that increase is due to the restoration of the Gaithersburg Fire Station 8 and Cabin John Fire Station 30 in the project scope. It's partially offset by the elimination of Kensington Fire Station 25 from the project. The next, I'm sorry.
So go ahead.
The next one is fire stations, life safety systems on circles 10 through 11. That provides for the construction of life safety systems in fire stations, including fire alarms with voice capability, sprinkler activation for fire suppression, fire and smoke detection, flow and tamper switches, and smoke control systems. 29 fire stations have been completed through FY19. 3 fire stations are planned through FY22, and that includes Glen Echo, Sandy Spring 4, and the old Fire Station 25, which is the Aspen Hill Shelter, in FY22. Recommended funding is approximately $141,000 less for the approved CIP, from the CIP, reflecting the elimination of duplicative funding already programmed in the Kensington Fire Station 25 project. Emergency power system upgrades, 12 through 13, is very similar. 29 stations have been completed through FY17. 4 stations remain, including Sandy Spring 40, Silver Spring Fire Station 1, and Glen Echo Fire Station 11 in FY21, and the old Fire Station 25 in FY22. There are no more fire station power upgrade projects beyond FY22. Recommended funding is approximately $439,000 less from the approved CIP, and again, it's due to the elimination of duplicative funding programmed in the Kensington Fire Station 25 project. Same for HVAC and electric replacement on circles 14 through 15. Funding for this increases by $2.3 million, and that's adding the FY25 and FY26 expenditures. They've conducted HVAC condition assessment studies for 20 of the fire stations and recommended that all 20 stations be renovated. 4 stations are slated to have HVAC replacements in FY20. And HVAC systems will be replaced in the following stations: Damascus in FY21, Hyattstown number 9 in FY22, Sandy Spring number 4 in FY23, Silver Spring Station 19 in FY24, and Silver Spring Station 16 in FY25. And the Rockville Fire Station 3 is last in FY26. With any luck, they'll have some more definite plans for either relocation or renovation of that station by then.
Okay.
Resurfacing, circles 16 through 17. Again, this provides for the repair and replacement of paved surfaces at fire and rescue stations. Recommended funding increases by $600,000 to add FY25 and FY26 expenditures. The current resurfacing schedule includes Fire Station 29 at Germantown, Fire Station 8 in Gaithersburg, Fire Station 4 in Sandy Spring, Fire Station 5 in Kensington, Station 19 Silver Spring, and Station 1 in Silver Spring in FY26. Roof replacement again. Minor repairs and routine maintenance are funded in the operating budget, but this is for more significant replacements. They include Gaithersburg Washington Grove Fire Station in FY20, Bethesda Station 26 in FY21, Upper Montgomery Fire Station 14 in FY22, Cabin John Station 30 in FY23, and so on. The recommended funding increase, I know, and funding increases by about $704,000 by adding again expenditures for FY and F25 and 26.
There's got to be a raise the roof joke here somewhere, but anyhow. Yeah.
Other projects that I just listed briefly, these are technically pending closeout. The first one I wanted to discuss is Glen Echo Fire Station renovation. Even though pending closeout sounds like it's over, it's not over. It's just that its initial funding is no longer included in the 6-year expenditure schedule, so it's technically pending closeout. But what's going on here would be a renovation of a volunteer station, and they're currently under new leadership at that station. And this is just, since there's no funding at this point, it's allowing that new leadership to get situated and review their needs and come back to the county with some new plans.
Okay.
Glenmont Fire Station, however, that is done. Construction was completed in 2016. Kensington Fire Station 25, the reason for expenditure reductions in so many level of effort. areas is scheduled to be completed in the fall of 2020. And then a master lease for self-contained breathing apparatus, all of that was replaced in FY17. And again, these are pending closeout. Council staff's not recommending any changes.
Anything from you?
No, I mean, just sort of a general comment. I know as we look at CIP, we're focused obviously on the capital and construction, but I always worry about the corresponding maintenance necessary to keep these facilities humming. I know that's part of the operating budget, but just generally, Mr. Assant, if you could comment on DGS's perspective, if this will have any impact on operating and if something we should flag or be on the lookout for.
Thank you. I think what you see here, and obviously council staff has a very good handle on all of the things that we're working on in terms of level of effort projects, and I think what you see is a concerted effort to invest and make upgrades to our existing facilities as we continue to think about new needed facilities, and you heard about some of those, but at the same time devote the resources necessary. A lot of these projects and a lot of the stations that you heard about, and the chair is familiar with Station 8 in particular, is a prime example of how complex these projects can turn into, given their culmination of operational and programmatic needs and changes over decades that have caused alterations to the building, female facility upgrades, and so forth. But really, just as simple as HVAC and life safety systems, trying to get all that together and then do one comprehensive renovation is a bowl of spaghetti, quite frankly. So it's ongoing. We have a good game plan in place. We have obviously you've heard a lot about the queue today, so we're thinking not just about this year with the funds that we have, but these are programmed in the out years, and we will continue to program. And just like the library refresh or the recreation refresh, these are basically the fire station refreshes, and we will continue and then recycle the order. And then, of course, the new stations will come online. So you'll see it in the operating budget as well in a few weeks, but certainly for the CIP, that's I think it's evidenced in the executive's recommended CIP that we continue that course.
And if I can add on to Greg's point, these 6 level of effort projects are complemented by one that is building envelope, which is in the DGS listing. The overhead door replacement or sectional door replacement is one that got started 2 years ago. And fire rescue, along with rec centers and other facilities, have these overhead garage doors, and the sets and reps, or the number of times these doors go up and down in our environment, is extraordinarily high compared to traditional use. And that building envelope CIP outlines 3 stations a year having door replacement. Door replacement in some facilities allows you to prepare for longevity of life, as well as identify, and as you said, Mr. Abernaz, go towards operating maintenance and preventative maintenance. So this is a great opportunity that DGS and Fire Rescue were able to do by getting that into the building envelope program. And as Susan outlined, the Ty and Greg talked about Station 8, we talked about Station 25 in Aspen Hill. The capabilities of these projects go from generators that were just barely life safety or just barely operational necessities of opening the doors to being 100+% of the building's capacity and needs, enabling these facilities to be long-term island operational approaches to supporting the community needs, and then all the life safety upgrades and operational environments. So definitely work ahead, and as you see, some of them are ending up or coming to their fruition, and some of them are getting another 6 years worth of program, and it'll be a cycling around as our LFRD owned buildings are averaging over 50 years in their life themselves, and that's 2/3 of our operational structures are LFRD owned structures.
We're good. Are you good? So it'll be a 2-0 recommendation.
Thank you.
Is there anything else to come before us today? No? Thank you all for being with us. We are adjourned.